Okay. Yeah. So we discussed exception handling in the last session. So we'll see what is function and how to use. Generally, there are two types of functions we have. So one is a built-in function. So built-in functions we already discussed. So built-in functions we discussed that like print is a function, ID is a function, type is a function, len is a function. There are multiple built-in functions we discussed. All the built-in functions we can check using with the dir of underscore underscore built-ins. And then we have a custom functions that is user-defined functions also we can say. So the user-defined functions, we create our own function, right? We create our own function. So what is the use of functions? So generally we create functions for reusability, we can say. That means it reduces the code length. So instead of writing the same code again and again, we can create a function and we can reuse that. So how to create a function in Python? So we use a def. So def and then function name. If there is any argument, we can also define arguments here. And then here function name. That means, so this is a function declaration or function definition. And this is a function call. So function call, or we call it as a calling function. This is called function. So there is a function definition. So there is a function definition and function call. So with the arguments, if you want to write, we write like this arguments, argument 1, argument 2 like this. But how many arguments we have, that many values must here. So let's say if I have a 2 arguments, 2 values must. One argument, one value must. It is depending on how many arguments we have. So the number of arguments in the function definition should exactly match with number of values in the function call. The number of arguments in the function definition should exactly match with number of values in the function call. And also it follows all the times positional order. What is positional order? First value to the first argument, second value to the second argument, like that. So let's see now how to create this function. First of all, where exactly we use and what is the use of this. For example, assume, okay, so for example here, see, assume that I have a some value 10, x value 10, y value is something 2. I want to perform some sub multiplication. So sum of x and y is, and then I'm just writing x plus 1. Okay. So similar way, I'm also performing sub and then multiplication. Okay. So this is actually, I'm performing some sub multiplication. When we run the code, we can see the output here. Okay. So syntax error, f string, line number 3. So we should actually close this double quotes here. Okay, now you can see the output sum of 10 and 2, sub of 10 and 2, mul of 10 and 2, and then separator. So output separation. Okay, assume the same thing I want to perform. For example, y value is 3 here, and y value is 4 here, y value is 5 here. Okay, so I just want to perform only these values since the values are changing for y. If you see the output here, output output we are getting, there is no problem. But the problem is the same code repeated multiple times. Say the same piece of code repeated multiple times. So there is not good program. The reason is multiple things we can say here. One, the same code again and again it is repeating. And execution it may take time, and then also debugging will be difficult. So around 25 lines of code we have. But for the same thing now, if you create a function, so let's first try to understand how to create a function. So def, some function name, let's say function name is test. And then I want to print something, print I am testing function. Okay. So this function now, we created a function, but when this function will execute, whenever if you call the function, so this is what we discussed. A function name, it will not execute directly until we call. And in Python, always remember first you should define the function, then later you can call the function. You cannot call this function, you know, before this function creation. Programming languages, it's possible, but here always function name, the function definition should be top and then always function name here like this. So which means you cannot use the function name from here. Even if you created a function here, 15th line, you cannot call this function from 30th line. So always whenever if you are calling the function call, it will search for the function definition only from here to top. So this is how the function it will check. Okay, so now here I created a function. So this function it will not directly execute until you call the function. So no output here. Then how to call this? Just you can call like this test. Now if you see, I am testing function. So it is executing. How many times you can call? You can call n number of times. One function we can call n number of times. Now we can see if I execute again. If you clearly observe, it is also the PyCharm, it is giving some suggestion like, two usages means two times actually we are calling. That is the meaning for that. Okay, so this is without arguments. Let's say with argument means what? For example, same thing I'm using here. And I'm creating some x here. So when you write x here, one value we should provide from this function call. Otherwise, what happens, you can see this is a type error. Test missing one required position argument for x. So x is mandatorily required the value. So if you provide a value, then only it accepts and then it will print. So this is what the number of arguments in the function definition should exactly match with number of values in the function call. Okay, now based on this, we created actually here 25 lines of code. So what I'm trying to do now, so I'm trying to copy this piece of code here. So y value 2 to 5 we defined. So something, I'm just writing arithmetic, or maybe I'm just using, or calculation, just I'm writing calc. X comma y I'm writing here. And then I'm just trying to paste that code. So this is the repeated code. And I'm just trying to call now 10 comma 2. So x value by default it is taking as a 10, y value it is taking as a 2. So one output we got here. But similar way, we can actually call here y value 3, y value 4, y value 5. So I just provided 10 comma 5, but internally it is taking like this. But you can see the output now, the same output, the old output, what we got with the 25 lines of code, same output we got. But how many lines of code here? Only 9 lines. So it reduces what? The code length. And also if you see, only one time we created a function, right? Only one time we created a function and we are keep on reusing that function with function call. You don't need to create a number of times now this piece of code, since it's a repeated code in the last program here we saw that, right? So you can create like this and then you can reuse it. So this is the actual use of function. You can create a function and you can reuse whenever if it is required. Just type here, see if it is clear. Okay, so here there are some function arguments like required arguments, keyword arguments, default arguments, variable length arguments like that. So I'll not go deep on that now, so but I'll show you like how it actually works. For example, see, So whatever we discussed, it comes under required arguments. Keyword arguments means, so like a keyword, yeah, so keyword arguments means keyword arguments generally related to function call. So in the function call, we create a keywords, or we call it as a parameters. So whenever if you call the function, the caller will identify based on the keyword. So what is the advantage? The advantage is it will not follow the position order. So if you want to skip that position order, you can use that. Let's say, see here, for example, I'm using F1 of A comma B. So I want to print here A value is, and I'm calling here F1 of 10 comma 20. So A value 10, B value 20, it is taking like this. But when I provide a keyword, for example, see, I want to write something like this, B equal to 22, A equal to 11. So this is called keyword. So we are providing a value with the keyword where we are providing in the function call. So when you provide a values like this, now it will understand based on this keyword. Okay, so it takes A value as 11, B value as a 22. So A value it takes as 11, B value as a 22. So this is not now following first value to the first argument, second value to the second argument. It is completely based on the keyword now. So this is generally we call it as a keyword arguments. So the keyword arguments, when you provide, you can see this, the values it understands based on the keyword which we provide. And there is a default argument. What is default argument? Default argument always we write at end here. So means if you want to write all the arguments also you can, but only always right to left. So first if you are defining a default argument, always it should be at the right side arguments. So for example here, I'm just writing B value something, otherwise I'll write one more example. So def something info name comma age. So if age is not provided from the function call, I want to take the age default 18. So print name is something I'm trying to print like this. And then print age is, and then I'm calling now. So if you see age is default, so let's say if I provided here, for example, Ram, comma, something 35. So it will take now name as Ram, age as 35, it will print that. But same thing, for example, if I write age equal to, see I'm using keywords, age equal to 29, name equal to, comma, name equal to, let's say Siri. So based on the keywords, it works now. Now info, assume I'm only providing name. I'm not providing age, but still it accepts this because there is a default argument. So the default argument, it handles that if you are giving only name, then it will take the default argument. So if you are providing argument explicitly from the function call, always what argument you provided that will take. So we provided age 35, age 29. If you see 35, 29 only, it accepted. But whenever if you are not providing anything, right? Whenever if you are not providing anything, then the default argument comes to the function. Getting my point. So for example, see, we already discussed file handling concept. In the file handling concept, read mode is default mode. So how it is taking that as a default? Somewhere here it defined that. Let's say, I'll show you one use case then. So DF, some operations, arithmetic operations I'm trying to perform. And here I'm taking the values a comma b, and then the default operator I'm taking here plus. So I'm performing some arithmetic operations, but the default operator I'm just providing here plus. So now, whenever if I'm providing some operator from the function call, should accept okay based on the operator what I provided, and then should perform here that arithmetic like plus by default. So explicitly, if I am not providing plus, then okay, I accept that default as a plus and then perform it. So here A is not provided, but since it's provided actually what default one, it is printing that edge. So how we can write that? Any guess how we can write this type of example? So this is similar to when we open a file, the file object. So read mode is optional. That means what? That is a default mode. So where it defined that as a default. Now similar way, if I'm not providing any operator, so I want to take that default operator. See if something operator, if it is equal to plus, and then I want to perform here print f string sum of a and b is a plus b. Elif if operator, if it is equal to minus, then I want to perform here sum of a, so this is sum of a and b is a minus b. Elif operator, if it is equal to star, so print f string mul of a and b is A star B. Like this I'm writing. Else unknown operator. So something I'm writing like this here. So what is the use of this function now? Whenever if I am actually calling, okay, let's say if I just provided a value. So this is something like a value, B value I provided now. That is the meaning. But I'm not giving any operator here to perform. If I'm not giving any operator, the default operator is plus. See, sum of 10 and 20 is 30. When you read the file, if you're not giving any operator, default operator, it is treating as a read. So somewhere inside in the source code, it defined that like a function, default argument, the mode for read. So here also, if I'm not providing any operator, default argument plus it is taking and giving the values. But let's say if I write something like 100, comma 200, comma, and then I'm just providing here now, for example, this is something like a minus. See, when I provide here this operator equal to minus. So I provided operator minus. Or let's try to run this first. Now I can see sub of 100 and 200 is minus 100. So when we provide here explicitly, and then based on this operator, it is performing. But if you are not providing here, by default, it is performing what? Addition. Or if you provide some any other than this, then it will give you unknown operator. So I hope this is clear now. So this is how the default arguments it helps. And we do have a variable length arguments for tuple unpacking, dictionary unpacking, those things. So by default, it will take the values as a tuple. So this is a variable length argument. Let's say a comma asterisk symbol b. So when you use asterisk symbol, the a is actually what. See, there are two things now. One is actually variable length. So the variable length it holds 0 to infinite values. But the a it is actually what the formal argument. The formal arguments always we should provide how many arguments we have that many values. So for A, we need one value, but for B, you can provide any value. So it is giving suggestion. See, B is a tuple by default now, since we are providing star B. So this is a variable length argument we can say. So let me first print A here and then print B. And I want to see what is the type of B here. So type of B should be what? Tuple. By default, it is taking like a tuple. So F1 of how many values mandatory now? Anyone? How many values mandatory here? For this function call, how many values mandatory? Two or two values. Then concept not clear for you guys. Okay, try to understand again then. What is A here? It is argument. This is called formal argument. What is star B? Star B is a variable length argument. The formal arguments, how many arguments we have, that many values must. How many arguments we have formal arguments? Only one. That many values must means one value is must. What is asterisk symbol B? This is a variable length argument. For variable length argument, how many values required? 0 to infinite. If you are not providing value, okay. If you are providing 100 values, also it accepts. If you are providing 1000 values, also it accepts with one argument. That is a variable length argument. Which means no values also, it will not give any error. Even if you provide something 1000 values also, it will accept that and it will give you in a tuple format. So we have a one formal argument, one variable length argument. So as just discussed, variable length argument, it takes in 0 to infinite. But formal argument, the value is mandatory. Which means how many values must now? How many values must? It should be 1. So mandatory is 1. Now see here, type error. Because F1 is missing what? One required positional argument for A. It is only checking for this. For example, I'm just giving 10 now. Then it accepts. See, B is actually what? Empty tuple. Now I'm writing 11 comma something 22. One value I provided. Even one value if you provide, it will take as a comma separator. See, it is treating that as a tuple. This is all are internally, right? For example, 100 comma 200 comma 300 comma 400, 500, 600. So how it allocates now? A value it treats as 100, but remaining all it is B value. So this is a tuple. Right? So whenever if it is required one argument mandatory, then we go with that. Let's say if you don't want formal argument, if you want to directly use this B, you can define that as well. So now it accepts what? 0 to infinite values. Everything it accepts. So this is how the variable length arguments it actually works. There is a return function. So what is return? So return, it will return to the function call. So for example, see df f1 of a comma b. And I'm performing something sum equal to a plus b. I don't want to print this output here. I want to return this back to the function call. So I can use return of something. If you are using return of something or return of expression, it will return back to that. If you are not using anything, just if you mention return, none it will return. None. None is a null value. But I have something return of sum. So it will return what? Let's say f1 of 11 comma 22. No output here. The reason is the return value, it will replace as, see this is a function call, right? So this function call replaces with the return value. Which means now 33 is here. But how to print this 33? So the total f1 of 11 comma 22 replaced with this value 33. But if you want to print this 33, either we need one argument, like means one variable, or at least we need a print function. But nothing there. That is the reason not printing this result. So which means whenever if you are using a return function here, when you call the function, you should know how to call. So this is how you can call. Either you can use print f1 of, for example, 100 comma 200, then it accepts. Or maybe you can create some variable and then call this here, let's say 3 comma 4, and then print x. This is fine. Now see the result now. So the first one, print function, we are using print function explicitly. So the return value replaced what the function call. So 300 here. So it is printing that 300. And the next time what I did, whenever if I'm calling a value 3, b value 4 here, and then the return, it returned to the function call f1 of 3 comma 4 replaced with 7. But the 7 it assigns to the x variable, and then we are printing that 7 here. So this is how the return it works. Return means return to the function call. But this is more and more important when you use modules. So modules you'll understand in detail. And again in the functions we have a concept called global variables and local variables. So we call it as a global scope and local scope. So global variables always in Python, if you define any variable outside of the function, that is a global. So you can access anywhere, whatever, wherever you want. For example, I'm creating x value 10 and f1 here I'm writing. And let's say I'm creating something y value 20. Print x, it is possible since we defined this x variable outside the function. Y variable I created inside the function. So this y variable only we can access within the f1. So here also I'm creating some another variable in f2. So x variable you can access here. Y variable you cannot access. Z variable you can access. Which means what? The variables which are defined outside the function can access anywhere. That is a global variable. But the variables, if you define any variables inside the function, that is a local variable. Only within the function you can access. You cannot call this function here. You cannot call this variable here because this is a local variable. Local variable within that function. But x variable, wherever you want, you can call it now. So x variable you can call outside the function as well, inside the function as well. So I'm just trying to call here print outside. So I'm calling here f1, f2. Let me print x value. Let me print y value, z value. So I told that only x can access, but y we are getting error here. So let me comment this here now. Now outside we are getting error. See this. Outside, first it is printing outside, and then we are actually, maybe you can write this outside. Okay, so first I'm calling f1. So for our understanding, I mentioned this. Now you can see here in the output, first I'm in f1, 10, 20 it printed, and I'm in f2, 10, 30 it printed. So f2 also, I commented that y value. Outside it is printing only 10. So outside it is only printing 10. So y value, z value not accepting. Because x is a global, it is printing only x value. But now, what we understood, global variable means whatever the variable if you define outside the function. But local is actually something inside the function. If you create, that is a local, right? So let me copy the same code again. So what I want to do, I want to create this y variable as a global variable, which means I want to access that y variable here also. But if you see, it's not possible because it's a local. See, name y is not defined. We are getting that error. Okay, so how we can make this y as a global? You can define the keyword as global. Global is a keyword, global y. So try to understand where I define this global y. I define the global y inside my function. And when you create this global y, so the global statement, you can see this is a global statement is declared, which holds the entire current code block. So means whatever the variable y, wherever the variable y you create here inside this function, this variable it treats as a global now, which means what? This y variable you can access even in F2. This y variable you can access even in outside. Because y is a global, since I provided keyword global y, the y variable now it is treating as a global variable even if you define inside the function. Because of this keyword. Now let me run this. Now I can see outside 20 we are getting. Now I can see in F2 also we are getting a y value 20. But now the z variable I created here inside the function F2, but it's not a global. So which means what? You'll not get that value. You can see there is error. Z is not defined. So outside we are not getting that value here. But if you want to get that value, what we need to do? You can create this variable also as a global variable if you want. So how to create? Again, this is a separate function. You can use global C. And now you can see we are getting that result. So global and local. By default, if you create any variable inside the function, that is a local. Outside the function, that is a global scope. But inside the function also, if you want to create any variable as a global variable, then you can use the keyword called global. So I hope this is clear. If yes, then just type here in the chart. It's clear. Just type C. Okay. So with this, we completed functions concept. Okay. So next session, we will see modules. Let me stop recording.